Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. And today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We are going to be going all the way back to the 4th century to explore the life and ideas of one of the most influential figures in Western thought.
All right.
Augustine of Hippo.
Augustine.
Now, our guide for this journey is a great video I found on YouTube by Bishop Robert Barron.
Oh, yeah.
It's called A Life of Heroic Sanctity, Augustine of Hippo.
All right.
And you might be thinking, why should I care about some guy from 1600 years ago?
Yeah.
Right. What could he possibly have to say to us in the 21st century? Well, Augustine's insights into human nature are so brilliant, so timeless, that they still resonate with us today. And he's widely considered one of the cornerstones of Western thought.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
And once you understand his ideas, you start to see their influence everywhere. So that's what makes this deep dive so exciting.
Yeah, it's amazing how Augustine's work has just stood the test of time. You know, I mean, he was a theologian, a philosopher, a master of the Latin language.
Right.
And I think what's really cool is that he also essentially invented autobiography with his book Confessions.
Yeah, Confessions is really something special because before Augustine, you had histories and biographies, but he really dove deep into his own thoughts and feelings and, you know, all of his struggles and triumphs. Yeah. And, you know, it was a very raw and honest account of a person's inner life. Yeah,
and I think that's part of what makes him so fascinating. You know, he wasn't some perfect saint from the beginning. You know, Augustine was born in North Africa in 354 AD, and he was ambitious, loved the classics, like Virgil, Cicero. But he also got caught up in the, shall we say, excesses of Roman life.
Right, and especially in Carthage.
Yeah, Carthage.
Where he spent his youth.
Known for being kind of a wild place.
Yeah, it was known for its wild parties. And, you know, less than saintly activities. And Augustine himself, you know, admits to getting caught up in all of it. I mean, he had affairs, a son out of wedlock. It's like he was leading this double life, you know?
Right.
On the one hand, you have his very devout Christian mother, Saint Monica, who never stopped praying for him.
Right.
And on the other hand, you have Augustine pursuing all of these worldly ambitions and indulging in all sorts of pleasures.
Yeah, it's that tension, that struggle that I think makes his story so relatable. You know, he wasn't born a saint. He became one. And that journey of transformation is what I think is so compelling about him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's talk about his conversion. So it wasn't some sudden dramatic event, but this kind of gradual process that unfolded over years.
Yeah.
And in the video, Bishop Barron points out that it kind of started with Augustine's love of philosophy, which was sparked by reading Cicero. And this kind of ignited this lifelong pursuit of wisdom in him. Yeah. You know, this desire to really understand these deeper questions of life.
And I think that's what led him to, you know, Augustine realizes there's more to life than just these surface level pleasures. And he starts searching for some kind of deeper meaning, some deeper truth. And I think that's what leads him to Manichaeism, which was this religion at the time that viewed the world as this battleground between good and evil.
Yeah, and Manichaeism offered a framework for understanding suffering, which was something Augustine was really grappling with.
Right.
But it didn't fully satisfy him.
No.
His mother, Saint Monica, of course, played a key role during this time.
Yeah.
Never gave up on him.
Never stopped praying for her son.
Constantly praying for his conversion.
Yeah, it's really a testament to the power of persistent prayer and a mother's love.
For sure it is.
Right.
And eventually, Augustine moves to Milan, hoping to advance his career.
Right.
But he was still restless.
Still searching.
Still searching. Yeah.
And that's where he encounters the famous Bishop Ambrose of Milan.
Ambrose was a brilliant preacher and a brilliant thinker.
Right.
And he introduces Augustine to this idea of Neoplatonism, which is this philosophical system that offered a different perspective on good and evil than Manichaeism.
Right. So you can imagine Augustine is being pulled in all these different directions at the time.
Right.
You know,
his ambition.
His
intellectual curiosity, and this growing attraction to Christianity.
It all comes to a head in this moment that Bishop Barron describes as the Tollage experience.
Yeah.
So Augustine was in a garden, feeling just overwhelmed with emotion.
Right.
And he hears this child's voice saying, "Take and read, take and read." And so he opens, just randomly, the letters of St. Paul.
Oh, wow.
And something clicks.
Yeah.
The words just resonate with him on this really deep level.
Yeah.
And they address all the questions and anxieties that he'd been carrying for years.
And shortly after this, he is baptized by Ambrose. And what's important to note here is that this wasn't some blind faith conversion.
No.
Augustine had been wrestling with these big questions for years.
For years.
Right. And Christianity didn't just provide him emotional comfort.
Right.
It offered him answers that satisfied him intellectually as well.
Yeah, his conversion was the culmination of years of searching and questioning and grappling with these really profound ideas.
Yeah.
And it led to a radical change in his life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. A radical change.
It's really interesting because, Augustine has this profound conversion experience, right?
Right.
But he doesn't just, become a monk and retreat from the world.
Right.
He actually ends up leading a very active life.
Yeah.
And he gives up his career and goes back to Africa and starts this philosophical community with his friends.
Yeah.
And you think someone who loved the finer things in life would have trouble with that.
You'd think, yeah.
It really shows, the depth of his transformation.
Yeah.
He was willing to give up everything for this new face. But even though he was seeking this simpler life,
right,
he was soon called to serve the church in a bigger way.
Yeah.
He was ordained a priest. And then in 395 A.D., he becomes the bishop of Hippo.
Wow. And he wasn't just a figurehead bishop.
No.
He was a busy guy.
He was deeply involved in the community, preaching, writing, constantly battling all these heresies that were popping up.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much he accomplished.
It really is.
Besides Confessions, he wrote tons of other works, including his masterpiece, City of God.
Yeah.
And
speaking of City of God, that's a book that was born out of a crisis.
Okay.
Remember, this is written after the sack of Rome in 410 A.D.
Right.
Which was a truly shocking event for the Roman world.
Yeah.
And a lot of pagans at the time blamed the rise of Christianity for Rome's decline. Yeah, it's interesting how he uses this crisis as an opportunity to kind of lay out his vision of history and society.
Yeah.
And in City of God, he introduces this really interesting idea of two cities, the earthly city and the city of God.
Yeah.
So how did he describe these two cities?
Also, he argued that Rome fell not because of Christianity, but because of its own kind of internal decay, its moral corruption.
Right.
And he wasn't talking about literal cities, of course,
Right.
These were metaphors for two ways of living, two different sets of values.
Yeah.
And so the earthly city, Augustine argues, is characterized by self-love.
Okay.
The pursuit of power.
Yeah.
Worldly success.
Right.
Kind of think of it as a city that's ruled by ego and ambition.
It sounds a bit like the world we live in today.
Yeah, right.
A little bit.
The constant striving for more, the obsession with status and wealth.
Yeah.
And Augustine saw this kind of, self-centeredness as ultimately destructive. And he contrasted it with the city of God, which is based on love of God.
Okay.
Love of neighbor. It's about seeking justice, living a virtuous life,
right,
putting the needs of others before your own.
So this idea of two cities isn't just some abstract theological concept.
No.
It has real implications for how we live our lives, how we organize society.
Absolutely. It's a call to examine our own motivations.
Yeah.
Our desires.
Yeah. Which city are we building? Not just around us, but within ourselves.
Exactly. That's such a powerful question.
Yeah.
And it connects directly to Augustine's ideas about sin and grace.
Okay.
So he argued that we're all born into this condition of sin, kind of a spiritual brokenness.
Okay.
It's not just about making bad choices.
Right.
It's a deeper state of being.
This is where he gets really insightful, I think.
Yeah.
Because he saw sin as this kind of turning inward, this focus on the self, that ultimately leads to unhappiness and separation from God. And he compares it to like an addiction.
Yeah, like an addiction.
Right.
And like any addiction, we can't overcome it on our own.
Right.
We need help from outside ourselves, which is where grace comes in. And Augustine believed that God's grace is freely given to us.
Right.
Empowering us to break free from the grip of sin.
Right.
And to turn outward towards God and towards others.
And this idea of sin as a condition, I think really resonates with us today.
Oh, yeah.
We see it in, people's struggles with addiction,
right,
with systemic injustice, even with things like unconscious bias.
Yeah.
I mean, Augustine was wrestling with these deep questions about human nature centuries ago. And his insights are still so relevant.
Oh, they're so relevant for us today.
And what's so compelling about Augustine, I think, is that he doesn't shy away from the dark side of human nature.
Right.
You know, he acknowledges our flaws.
Our capacity for selfishness.
Our capacity for selfishness and even cruelty.
And destruction, yeah.
Yeah, but he also offers hope, you know?
He believed in the possibility of transformation.
Right.
Of redemption.
Through God's grace.
Through God's grace, that's right.
And that message of hope is just as powerful today as it was back then.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
He reminds us that even when we mess up, even when we fall short, you know, we're not beyond redemption.
Yeah.
There's always the possibility of starting over, of turning back toward the light.
And I think Augustine's own life is a testament to that.
Yeah.
I mean, remember, this is a guy who lived a pretty wild life in his younger years.
Yeah.
But through a long process of searching and questioning and wrestling with his own demons, he found his way to a deeper truth, a more fulfilling way of being.
Yeah. And his story, I think, gives us permission to question, to doubt.
Yeah.
To wrestle with the big questions.
Absolutely.
You know, it reminds us that faith isn't about having all the answers.
Right.
It's about being on a journey.
It's a process.
A journey of self-discovery, of seeking truth.
Of striving to become better versions of ourselves.
Yeah. And that journey, as Augustine so beautifully demonstrates, can lead us to incredible wisdom, to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
Right.
And he didn't offer easy answers, but he gave us a framework, a way of thinking about life and its complexities that can help us to navigate the challenges we face.
So City of God is this massive work.
Huge, yeah.
And we've only scratched the surface here.
Barely, yeah.
But even this glimpse into Augustine's vision of the two cities, you know, has given us a lot to chew on.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked about his concept of sin and grace, his belief in the possibility of transformation.
Yeah.
But he didn't just write about these ideas. He lived them out in his own life.
He did.
You know, and one example that comes to mind is his work on just war theory.
Right.
So he strongly opposed violence.
He did.
And saw war as a symptom of this human desire for power and domination.
Right, which he attributed to the earthly city. Yeah. But he also recognized that in a fallen world, war is sometimes unavoidable.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So he developed these criteria for when war might be considered justified. Yeah. You know, he argued that it must have a just cause, be waged by a legitimate authority, and be fought with the right intention.
Right.
It's fascinating how he tried to bring this kind of moral order into even the most chaotic aspects of human life.
It's amazing.
And he wasn't a pacifist, but he believed that even in war, there had to be limits, ethical considerations.
Absolutely. And it shows how his thinking went beyond, you know, just theological debates.
Right.
It had practical implications for how society should function.
And those implications are still relevant today as we grapple with, you know, issues of conflict and violence.
Oh, for sure.
The use of force.
Yeah.
You know, Augustine's ideas about just war continue to be debated and discussed.
Right.
Shaping the way we think about these complex moral dilemmas.
Yeah, it's incredible how a thinker from the 4th century, can still
speak to us so directly. About the challenges we face in the 21st century.
It's amazing.
It really is.
And Augustine's life and work, I think, offer a wealth of insights into the human condition.
Yeah.
The struggle between good and evil, the search for meaning and purpose. But one of the things that make him so enduring, so compelling, I think, is his honesty.
Yeah.
You know, his willingness to share his own struggles and doubts. And in his confessions, he lays it all out there.
He does.
You know, his youthful excesses, his intellectual wanderings, his moments of despair and doubt.
He doesn't present himself as this perfect saint.
Right.
But as a fellow traveler.
Yeah.
A human being who wrestled with the same questions and temptations that we all face.
And I think that's what makes his wisdom all the more powerful.
Yeah.
He wasn't just preaching from on high. He was speaking from experience.
That's right.
From a place of deep self-awareness.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's this honesty, you know, that Bishop Barron highlights in the video. When he talks about Augustine, you know, inventing this idea of textured interiority.
Yeah.
And before Augustine, you didn't really see writers, you know, delving into their own psychology, their internal struggle in the way that he does.
Yeah, it's like he's giving us this whole new vocabulary for understanding the self.
Right.
You know, and by turning inward and examining his own thoughts, feelings, motivations, he really paves the way for modern psychology.
Yeah.
And the way we understand ourselves today.
It's amazing.
It really is.
And for example, in Confessions, He doesn't just, tell us about his youthful sins.
Right.
He reflects on the desires and anxieties that drove those actions.
Yeah.
And he explores the complexities of his own heart.
Yeah.
And in doing so, he helps us to understand our own a little bit better.
Exactly. It's amazing to think about the ripple effects of this, textured interiority.
Right.
You can see its influence in literature and philosophy and art.
Everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It's like he gave us permission to explore the depths of our own inner world.
Yes.
With all of its, contradictions and complexities.
Exactly.
So we've journeyed through Augustine's life, from his wild youth to his profound conversion, from his battles against heresies to his enduring vision of these two cities.
Right.
But why does all of this matter to us today?
Yeah. Why should we care?
Why should we care about some guy from the 4th century?
Right.
Well, I think Augustine's work is like this toolbox filled with insights
that are just as relevant today as they were back then.
Yeah, like what?
Well, take his understanding of the human heart.
Okay.
He knew firsthand the power of desire.
Right.
That constant tug of war between good and evil.
Yeah.
That plays out within each of us.
And he didn't sugarcoat things either.
No, he acknowledged the dark side of human nature.
Yeah.
Our capacity for selfishness.
Yeah, even cruelty.
And even cruelty.
Yeah. But he also believed in the possibility of transformation.
That's right.
Of choosing a different path.
Yeah.
And that's where his idea of grace comes in. Yeah. And grace isn't just this abstract theological concept.
No.
It's a power.
Right.
That can help us break free from these destructive patterns.
Yes. From the grip of sin and addiction.
It's a reminder that we're not alone in our struggles.
No, we're not.
There's this force for good at work in the world.
Yeah.
A force that can help us become better versions of ourselves.
That's right.
And then there's his vision of the two cities.
Right.
Which gives us this framework, I think, for understanding the complexities of the world around us.
Absolutely.
We see this play out in the tensions between individual freedom and the common good.
Yeah.
Between power and justice.
Right.
Between self-interest and compassion.
Exactly.
It's a call to examine our own allegiances.
Right.
Are we building the city of God?
Right.
A city characterized by love, justice, service to others? Or are we caught up in the values of the earthly city, pursuing power and success at the expense of others?
It's a tough question to ask ourselves.
It is.
But it's an important one.
Yeah, and Augustine challenges us to be intentional about the kind of world we're creating.
Right.
Both within ourselves and in the communities that we inhabit.
Absolutely.
And finally, Augustine's example shows us that it's okay to wrestle with doubt.
Yeah.
To question, to grapple with the big questions of life.
To be human.
Yeah. And he wasn't afraid to admit his own struggles.
Right. His own moments of darkness.
And in fact, it's his honesty, his willingness to be vulnerable that makes his insights so relatable.
So powerful.
And so powerful.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the life and thought of Augustine of Hippo, I want to leave you with a question. Where do you see the two cities playing out in your own life?
What choices are you making? What values are you prioritizing? What kind of city are you building within yourself and in the world around you?
Augustine would remind us that the journey starts with self-awareness, with examining our own hearts and asking ourselves what we truly desire.
That's right.
And from there, the possibilities for transformation, for creating a world that reflects the values of the city of God, are limitless.
They are.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep seeking.
Keep questioning.
And keep building that city of God wherever you go.